I'm Nirad Tiwari. I'm the CEO of AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this part of the digital transformation series. Um, it's a pleasure to also be collaborating with the TTMA on this. And let me thank from the outset my colleague Rayan Painter Mendez, who has been doing all the work to make all this happen. Just some housekeeping before we begin. The session is being recorded, so by participating, you're consenting to be recorded. And at the end of the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to pose questions. You can just post them in the chat to everyone, and I'll read them out as opposed to people intervening and asking the questions directly. Let me say that this webinar is part of our digital AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago's digital transformation series, which was made possible through the kind support of our title sponsor, Republic Bank, our platinum sponsors, Digicel Business Solutions, and PwC. This series is part of the work that AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago is doing to support and advance the digital transformation of our country. A transformation that we think will not only improve the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago, but one that is needed to enhance competitiveness and export capacity. We started this digital transformation series some time ago with our first webinar, The Time for Tech is Now, back in May, to promote and implement tech solutions to update our business models. And that was just this year. Last year, of course, we would have had this conference. More information can be found on that at techislands.net. We're here this morning, though, to talk about advancing industry through tech. As you're aware, COVID-19 has definitely accelerated the influence of tech in our lives and our businesses. You know, I know you've heard it before, but I can't help use the joke. Who has done more for your digital transformation in the history of your company? Your CEO, your CIO, your CFO, or COVID-19? And the answer is obviously COVID-19. So tech-enabled businesses, and so no business should see itself as not a tech business. Every business should see itself as a tech business because tech must enable all that you do if you're truly going to be competitive. But we often think of tech as being beyond our reach, but it's not. Before COVID-19, tech was already a leading influence in how we work, live, and play. The internet provided us with a means to conduct business, communicate, shop, research a lot differently than we did before. Everything from marketing to PR to security has a digital element. And no doubt technology is the driver of success for modern businesses. Today, software, big data analysis, fiber optics, drones, image recognition, artificial intelligence, and so many things are playing an important role to enhance our different industrial sectors. I don't know if we will hear today from Brian in the context of, is your fridge, is your smart fridge your weakest point in your home? Because some time ago, although we're not talking about cybersecurity, there were denial of service attacks using smart devices in homes all over the world. So when we talk about the Internet of Things, how do we use these things to create value and how do we mitigate the risk? And so what I'd like to say is that we have access to all the technology that we need, and what we need to do is define what we need, what we're trying to do, and find the right partners to help us implement or build up the expertise in-house. And that's a question that you always have to ask yourself. Do you want to use an external partner or build the expertise in-house? And what's the opportunity cost of doing either? So with that, I'd introduce Brian Kane, who is the Digicel Group Head of IoT and Smart Cities, who's here to deliver a presentation on the role of IoT, or the Internet of Things, in the automation of the manufacturing process. A highly effective business development technologist and operations leader, having worked in operations and IT services company for the past 15 years. He has experience in multiple disciplines and various sectors, specializing in mobile and fixed connectivity, smart cities, cloud services, and more recently, IT security. Brian has honed many of his skills at Digicel and AT&T over the years, and smart cities are clearly a big winner for him, creating endless new ways to solve everyday issues that affect us all. It's my pleasure to introduce Brian Kane.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me okay. I will quickly share my screen, and thank you all for inviting me to this conference. I'm trying to get my screen shared here, so if somebody could allow me to do that.
Ray or Christian, can you allow all participants to share their screen?
Mr. Tu, are you not able to share your screen?
Not me, Brian, please.
Brian.
I've got it now. Perfect,
Okay,
thank you.
great.
Okay, is everybody seeing okay?
Yep, perfect. You just need to put it into presentation mode.
Will do, there we go. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much again for allowing us to be here. It's obviously a wonderful privilege for us to be participants, and you know, we're great partners with not just AMCHAM, but also with a lot of different businesses within the region. The topic today, obviously, the role of IoT in automation and manufacturing can actually apply to a lot of different businesses, not just the automation and manufacturing, but specifically bringing it down to this allows us to be able to sort of focus on some specific things that companies can do to help themselves, to identify clear issues within the organization and how to solve those problems very simply. So first of all, I thought I'd start off with just a quick phrasing. There's a lot of different ways to describe IoT, and you know, if you search for this on the internet, you'll see 20 different definitions. But for me, IoT is a combination of technology, people, and processes that are used to create and automate new outcomes and to improve the lives and environments for everybody. So it really is an effort of not just the technology, it is also the people, the processes, and those outcomes that we want to fulfill. IoT basically does three things, and if there's one thing I would ask people to take away from today is to remember these three things: telemetry, geolocation, and control. From a telemetry perspective, IoT collects data from specific data points that we've placed around our buildings and our smart cities and our organizations, and it pulls all of this data together into one specific location for us to use at a later date. Geolocation tells us where that device or person or object was and where are they now and how did they get from one place to another. And of course, the control piece, which is what differentiates IoT from M2M and these other automated solutions. It allows us to be able to get in and make those decisions, switch off the device, stop the device, or to take some other further action. So keep in mind those three things when we're talking about IoT. They are the three basic functions of what it does. Of course, IoT has brought many benefits to many different organizations, a host of new types of sensors, new ways of receiving information, new ways of controlling the world around us. And more importantly, data and automation have led us to these amazing new outcomes. For me, being able to collect a piece of data, have a system analyze that for me, and then to get that system to make an automated decision has probably been the biggest leap, as in it saves the time, it saves lives, cost, and effort, and brings incredible optimizations to different organizations around the world. And of course, as we know, the use cases are almost endless when it comes to IoT. There's no limit to the things that we can do with this. Use cases, of course, are not only limited to manufacturing, as we're discussing today, or production. Of course, oil and gas, transport, logistics, energy, and utilities are all different segments that benefit from using the power of IoT and the power of automation when they're producing or manufacturing something. The real outcomes here are getting those IoT systems to make those faster decisions and those more intelligent decisions for us, and to do that automatically. And this gives organizations the ability to focus on oversight of the business and growing the business and their time to market in a much more efficient way. We'll take a couple of examples. For example, in production, imagine being able to get microsecond real-time information from your devices within your manufacturing environment, telling you exactly different things. I'm out of fuel, I'm overheating, I'm having a problem doing something else. Imagine being able to have that information sent to your device or to a mobile device within microseconds and to be able to make a manual or automated decision. This is the power of these devices. I've actually seen devices like this work in real time, and being able to make those decisions is critical to any environment and making sure that we progress the environment to that point, making those devices a bit more intelligent. Understanding loss, loads, waste, and downtime gives you insights into performance, but also the ability to understand productivity peaks. All of the things that we do within manufacturing and production are all fueled by electricity and water, oil, gas. All of these things fuel our environments and help us to put that production in place. And I can give you a really good example of how we were able to help one particular company, a major international food manufacturing company, who are also based regionally and locally here in Trinidad, had some challenges within their organization, and they didn't really know how to address those challenges just yet. But when we spoke to them, they said, look, we're losing 5 days of five man days per week on devices not being charged up correctly. And what was happening was, in their environment, their people at the end of the day were not plugging in their high-powered devices and recharging them for work the next day. And that was a difficulty, because when staff arrived the next day, they would then plug the devices, and then the devices would take 2 hours to charge up, and you had a lot of people sitting around doing nothing for the morning. So we were able to put just one sensor on their distribution panel, and that sensor told them every single evening what was not connected, and they were able to call downstairs and tell their production manager to make sure that this was plugged in and ready for the next day. Just one sensor was able to do this. The second challenge that they had was they wanted a way to try to predict and avoid downtime on their production line and within their environment. Again, we were able to place sensors on the environment. We were able to measure when the devices were using electricity and how much electricity. So their devices and their machinery were built to specific standards, and they were using, say, 400 kilowatt hours of electricity. But over time, because of the sensors that we placed on the devices, they were able to see that the devices were now using 450 kilowatt hours, 490 kilowatt hours. And they knew it was time, that this machine was becoming more and more inefficient, and it was time to do a maintenance. So they were able to take the machine offline, out of production hours, do a maintenance, and start avoiding the downtime in their production environment. So again, 2 simple sensors addressed 2 specific problems that they had, and they were able to do all of this for a very, very low cost. And that is a great example of using IoT and the power of automation to its absolute maximum, saving these hours of optimizations and time and that reduction in production because of simple things in the way companies are run. Supply chain, of course, follows closely behind this, because our production lines need supplies. They need parts, they need ingredients, they need all of these different things, and it needs to be there on time when the production line needs it. So having that intelligent production line and logistics is able to tell you when they should ship the goods that are needed over to the production line to ensure that it keeps going and there's no stoppages. Safety, of course, is a big important matter in production and manufacturing environments. Milliseconds matter when it comes to this. If you think in a real world scenario, if someone was injured, it would take time for somebody to say, spot that injury. They would rush over, they would see what initially is the problem, and then they would contact for support. With smart technology introduced into that environment, you can now measure the impact of that person. Are they still vertical, or are they lying down? Can I switch on their camera and their microphone remotely? What can I know immediately? And even the technology, the environments that we've put in place can enable us to be able to make those automated decisions. This impact was severe, I'm going to automatically dispatch some assistance for that person. How does it work? So essentially, you have these devices and sensors. Depending on how intelligent they are, we can bring a lot of the intelligence down to the edge and let those devices make their own decisions. You can also send the data to your edge computing, or you can send it over a network to a cloud server to analyze all of this data, these streams of data coming from all the devices, to tell us in real time what is going on. And of course, all of that data comes back to our devices. We can make those manual or automatic alerts and the decisions behind them. The benefits, of course, we are connected to our customers and our suppliers. We get these continuous data streams, as we mentioned earlier. We have this automated restocking and replenishment is also possible. Identification of quality issues early. We were able to predict production capacity, increase the uptime, as we saw from the example earlier. Automated production, live metrics and tools, real-time forecasts of what we're going to produce and when. Better scheduling of people, machinery, maintenance, and all of these things tied back together can give us amazing benefits. And especially if we can do the holy grail of IoT, which is predictive analytics. If we can take that data to even higher levels, that is new ways to optimize the organization inside and out. Bring that intelligence a little closer to the edge and reach that stage that brings the most benefits to organizations. And the indicators are that the early adopters are the ones that benefit the most because they make those savings from earlier and over a longer period of time. So thank you very much. That's it from me. And I will hand back to my moderator. Thank you for listening.
Wow, you caught us by surprise, Brian. We're not used to so much useful information in a short space of time. At least my staff will tell you that. At least with me, I can be a little bit verbose. But thank you. And of course, the point being that these things are possible, and finding the right partner, whether it's Digital Business Solutions or whomever, will allow you to then decide on the right technology. And the technology is the hardware and the software, and how that, I think your first slide to me was the most important point, that people think of technology and technology being almost like you wave a magic wand, you implement a new solution, you purchase an app, and then everything works. But it's getting that integrated into your process and getting the right people to use it. So in your first example, when you get the data that these machines are unplugged, somebody or that information has to get to the plant manager or the floor manager in some form, and then there has to be a system for someone to go and physically plug those machines in. And so getting everyone looped into the system and understanding where it fits into the process matters. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's where the perception of the technology failing actually lies, which is the integration into the process and people understanding what the technology can do and how they should use it. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is helping people understand that it isn't just about installing something, a piece of hardware or software. It's also about the business around it and making sure that everybody understands that the data coming from this is telling us something, and then we need to decide what to do with that.
Correct. And then even just jumping even further back, it's knowing exactly what your problem is.
Exactly. And I think that's probably the number one question. Well, I don't want to preempt any questions here, but the number one question we get asked is, where do I start? Because it is literally limitless. There's 10 different ways to solve most problems, but what's the most optimal way to do that? So it is going backwards, looking at your organization holistically and saying, how do we run our company? How do we run? And where are our lack of optimization? Where's our downfall? What are we missing here? And then choosing specifically the solution to match that.
Great. And so to follow that wonderful presentation, we have Surabh Jain, who is a partner with the management consulting practice, of PwC India. Surab, we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'm not sure what city you're in India, but I do know it's either Friday evening or Friday night. And so to spend your Friday evening with us or night, we really, really appreciate it. Surab possesses 20 years of professional experience. He has a rich cross-functional experience across sectors such as manufacturing, consumer and retail, industrial products, e-commerce, and telecom, to name just a few. He has delivered several successful engagements in areas of digital operations, connected supply chain, cost transformation, sourcing, and procurement, business process re-engineering. He's a regular speaker at industry associations and conferences and has published several thought leadership papers. And Surab, the fact that Zia holds you in such high regard, Zia Payton from our local office, means that the pressure is on, because with her stamp of approval, you're golden in my book. I introduce Surab Ji.
Well, thank you so much, Nirad, for your kind words. So yes, it is evening time, and I'm based in India, in the northern part of India, which is near Delhi. Yeah, it's a Friday evening, but I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and really glad to be a part of this AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago seminar. So really looking forward to it, and hoping to also get a lot of questions maybe in the later part of the seminar. So let me quickly put up my screen. I hope it's visible.
Yes, it is. It's there.
Okay, wonderful. So, well, thank you once again, everyone. And again, the thought that I would like to also put on the table is that before I really jump into my slides is, there's a lot of buzzwords and a lot of talk about digital technologies and analytics. And when we talk about this, it's not just referring to the manufacturing sector alone, but you could scale it to a lot of services organization, banking industry, financial services, insurance, and we're not. So, what has really happened over the last few years, I must say, in my experience, personal experience is, this has become reality. So that I think we have really moved on from really looking at some of these as buzzwords to now all of it really becoming like a real picture or a real environment or real scenario in front of all of us. And I've personally seen several use cases where whether on the digital technology side or big data analytics kind of initiatives, there are significant benefits that organizations are deriving. And there are a number of use cases maybe which I will touch upon during my presentation over the next few slides. So this is a very, very interesting topic, very close to my heart. And let me quickly talk about just a bit of a background here. There have been these kind of industrial revolutions we all talk about, and there are those three big revolutions which have already happened, and we are in the midst of the fourth revolution, as we call it. I don't need to really possibly explain the industry 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, but really the 4.0 is where we are right now, and this is where there is a significant transformation that is happening with regards to whether how people work, how all of us work in our organizations, or how the processes work, and even the technology, the way it supports all of us and enables all of us to be more productive and more effective. And what's also happening very interestingly in this, this stage or this industry 4.0 revolution is there's a lot of cyber physical, things coming together. So it's not just alone technology, it's not just alone physical, but it's kind of a combination of two, which is really driving the change. And this integration, is really, is also helping, I would say, not just individuals, like all of us who are professionals, but also on the other hand, making the organizations also look at, many new ways of working. And, as was rightly said by Brian, that maybe COVID has really taught us much more and really expedited the pace of change even more and more that we've been kind of witnessing over the last few years. Now, the companies typically, again, in our experience, they move through about 4 levels of maturity when they look at any such journey of digitization. And it's really about not, expanding the capabilities and effectiveness of not only their internal ecosystem or within the organization, but even beyond. It could be, both the sides of the value chain, whether we talk about the inbound side of the value chain or the customer side of the value chain, which is the front end of the value chain. So this whole digitization is really making it more and more collaborative across the value chain, and which is beyond just one organization. The 4 stages that you see here, on this slide, it's really, the journey really starts from being organizations looking at some of the initiatives which could be very, very narrow, which could be isolated, and they maybe just pure technology initiatives, may not be fully called as digitization or digital initiatives. And it could be in the finance function, it could be some bit of technology like on the, let's say, the smart meters on the electricity front, or it could be some of the visibility related initiatives on the supply chain side. So novices typically would have few initiatives spread across in the organization, but not really in a very concerted or in a very coherent manner. The next level from novice is a follower, where there's a little more activity which happens beyond just the the digital integration within the company. And here also the culture and workforce of these companies are still not fully upskilled on digital or digitization aspects, and therefore there is a little bit more of integration and collaboration, but it is still not to the level that one could get to. So the organization would typically be having such kind of processes and systems would be called as digital follower. Digital innovator is something which I mentioned before, where we're talking about an enterprise, an organization connected to the external partners as well. You could very well be connected to your vendors, suppliers, and similarly to your customers, your distributors, and you could really seamlessly exchange information. And there's a significant amount of collaboration that happens, when it comes to digital innovators. And this is a lot more horizontal, digitization, but largely still immediate supply chain. The last aspect here, which is really, what companies are getting up to, and there are some benchmarks, one could look at, and there are organizations which have possibly reached a level of digital champion kind of a stage. Someone like, let's say, Starbucks, right? They have a lot of those innovations already built in, the kind of apps that they have. You could order, they have a number of those things, which have really enabled them, possibly, to an extent where we can call them as reaching the digital champion kind of a stage. Here we're talking about a lot of real-time end-to-end integration and connectivity across the value chain, and both internal and external. So this is much beyond my immediate supply chain. This actually goes end-to-end, across my external networks as well. And again, technology connects customers, partners, operations, people, all of those. And there's a lot of real-time information one could see and act upon proactively. And this is where also the concept of autonomous supply chain also starts coming in, where there are a set of decisions that the supply chain could take on its own on a day-to-day basis and act upon, while the management only needs to look at certain exceptions and act in that manner. And also the culture part is very important when it comes to digital champions. And this is where digital champions would have established a much stronger digital upskilling for their people and a culture in the organization. So these are the kind of 4 stages that we look at for different organizations, and how some of these things really evolve is, if you really look at this slide, on the left hand side you see the push part of it, which is really a lot of these technologies, possibilities that we all see, while the right hand side is the pull, which is really the expectations coming in from different companies or organizations or the clients that I've worked for. And this is really a combination of both, that there is a push. Yes, there are a lot of new technologies, whether IoT platforms that, Brian spoke about. There are artificial intelligence, one could implement in the processes. There is blockchain, big data analytics, and a number of those things, which are really now evolving at a very rapid pace and also at a very cost-effective manner. While the pull is, where an organization is looking to enhance the process efficiencies, on the manufacturing side, reduce downtime, improve reliability of manufacturing operations, quality, yield improvement, OTIF, which is on time in full for the supply chains, capital efficiency, and things like that. So it's really a combination of 2, and the digital champions specifically, are able to leverage both of these things very, very well. The disruptions which are happening, and they typically continue to evolve new business models and improve their operations also on a continuous manner, by looking at both the digital possibilities and the expectations of the organization and the shareholders as well. Now, if you look at analytics specifically, now what digital champions have been able to do well is really move up the ladder that you see in this chart on the right hand side. And again, it's an aspiration and a journey that most of the organizations undertake. It typically starts with descriptive, which is really where we are looking at the data and describing what happened, right? And it is really limited to that, and it's all based on historical information. So you look at that and see what happened, which is descriptive. The next stage here is diagnostic, where we really get to looking at the data and understanding the root causes, certain trend analysis, and the outcomes, and this becomes kind of a diagnostic, data analytics. Predictive, on the other hand, is where you are trying to predict in advance that what could actually happen, and this is really looking at the future outcomes based on a lot of simulations that you could do, a lot of trend modeling, you could do, and scenario building that you could do, etc. from past. Prescriptive is really the next one, where the whole data analytics focus starts, becoming more like what should be done actually in a certain context. Let's say if in a manufacturing company we are seeing certain downtime in factory and there could be a shortage of products. So could my data and analytics engine tell me that what should I be doing? Should I source this product from another location, another vendor, or what is the right thing to do? And this is where certain decisions start coming in through the system itself and recommendations start coming out. Again, the final decision could still be taken by the manager or the vice president, but there is still a level of prescription starts coming out from the data analytics. And cognitive is really the last level, where again we are seeing a lot of traction now, where there are companies who've come up with their applications, softwares, systems, which are really playing at the level of cognitive layer. And this is where we're talking about how do you really adapt to change. And there's a level of autonomous, decision making, that starts coming in, where it is not telling you what is to be done. Actually, the system actually starts doing on most of the decisions. It starts to take on its own. Only a few exceptions that would only come to the management. And I do know about certain systems which are there on the supply chain side, with some of the large biggies like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Reckitt Benckiser, etc. Today are testing and trying to see that how do I really make my supply chain really operate at the level of that cognitive layer, or you can even call it as autonomous supply chain, where things are really happening on their own given the complexities of the supply chains that they have. So this is really the journey a lot of digital champions have taken to enhance their business operations and even business models. I think this is very interesting here to talk about. Now, when we talk about a lot of this analytics and data analytics and digitization, what does it really lead to? Of course, there are a number of benefits which I will again talk about further. But then some of my experience, and this is really coming from some of the PwC inputs, from the clients that we worked for. Where are companies who inject big time into data analytics in their manufacturing operations or service operations, they outperform their peers by 5%, at least 5% in productivity and 6% in profitability. And this is really based on some real data for the clients that we worked with. So clearly there's a strong business case for building some of these things, in terms of both capabilities in the organization, the technology layers, and really ultimately to be able to use it in day-to-day operations and decision making. And there are a number of these things here, whether we talk about advanced visualization and analytics, big data infrastructure, and of course at the bottom is master and transactional data, because this is really the hygiene part of it. Unless this is right, this is set right, none of the other aspects can really be put into play. And I've generally seen this as a big challenge with several organizations where the data, input data or the transactional data is not good enough or clean enough to be able to use into my big data analytics, etc. Now, I spoke about some of the concepts and how digital champions look at it. There are certain challenges that we do see, and again, several organizations that I've worked for, there are several hindrances and challenges. And if you see on this left-hand side, these are the kind of questions everyone asks. Is digital my real need, or can I just continue in the way I am, the status quo that I have? Why do I need to change? What would be the ROI for all the investments of time, effort, money that I would do, and what kind of ROI I would get? There are a number of technologies in the market. There are best of the breed solutions. There are startup solutions. What do I go for? And where do I start? Do I start from my manufacturing operations? Do I start from a supply chain operations? Do I look at my support functions like finance, HR, etc.? So what is the starting point that I should really look at? So there are a number of these kind of questions that clients ask and companies ask, and this is really where it's very important that how do you really sort the noise, because there are confusions a lot of companies have, or different stakeholders in an organization would look at it differently. So the idea always is that how do you overcome these kind of challenges? How do you sort through the noise? How do you get funding and executive support as one of the key elements of success? How do you really think about the journey? Because it's not just one time effort that you do it over 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year and you're done. This is actually a journey that we all have to undertake, and several organizations have already started on this journey, and therefore are getting to the level of digital champion. But who have not, they really need to start now. There are new ways of working. We all are kind of going through it during the COVID times, but even several other new ways of working that can get embedded once you are on this journey. And of course, cybersecurity continues to be a big challenge, and one issue any organization has to really manage well while on this journey. So it's very important that as you look at this whole opportunity or a journey, look at your overall digital strategy, build a good digital roadmap so that you could tie the number of building blocks, get a lot of executive support in the organization and funding for it, and really go through it. The business case would definitely be there. I mean, I think that whole question of business case not being there, actually, to my mind, is now out of the window. For anything that you do, there will be a strong business case that one could put in place. I'll quickly talk through some aspects of manufacturing operations and supply chain. Now, these are the kind of 9 different elements that you see on this slide. Maybe a bit complicated slide, but it really starts, at the top, where we talk about supply chain planning and execution. That is one key area where several digital interventions one could look at to enhance supply chain visibility, track and trace, and things like that. I spoke about transparency and visibility is the second one. Third is on the procurement side. We talk about procurement 4.0, where we talk about a lot of digital contracts and number of areas that you could focus on from a procurement side. Smart warehousing, some of those use cases, and there are a number of technologies one could really look to implement in the warehouse to make it smart. Smart factory, again, I'll touch on a few use cases on the next slide. Logistics, I have a case study towards the end to talk about it. Customer management, data analytics, product development, and digital upskilling. I think these are some of the layers at the bottom that you see. But I think one of the most important ones I must mention to you is, sometimes which gets lagged behind, is the digital upskilling, of the organization and the culture, which is a very, very strong enabler for anyone to embark on this journey. So around these 9 themes that you see on this slide, there are several use cases and opportunities to really build a more digital operations and a connected supply chain. Specifically around the smart factory, there are use cases that I've put out on this slide. There are about 29 of those here. It starts at the top. What you see is on the overall performance management. One could look at role-based real-time analytics and KPI dashboards. There's a real-time and periodic reporting that you could put in place. So this is really looking at the overall performance of a factory on a regular basis. There are use cases within production planning and scheduling on the left-hand side that you see, whether it's around machine scheduling, real-time, any batch changes or line changes that you need to undertake, digital work instructions that could be passed on to the factory workforce, machine assignment, and number of things. Similarly, on materials management, manufacturing execution, there are again a number of use cases. Even you could look to measure near real-time OE calculation. You could actually see how well your factory is performing, or your overall operations are running, and calculate OE on a real-time basis. Automated fault detection and early warning. This is a very important one. And similarly, in energy management, I've generally seen a lot of companies starting on these kind of areas to start with, around maintenance, around energy management, as the set of use cases from a manufacturing setup perspective. Similarly, tool and machine maintenance, where you could actually get into a lot of predictive machine maintenance kind of areas and use cases. Workforce management, more in terms of resource scheduling, how do you really plan for them? And, also, if it's a large setup, a workforce track and trace also is possible to this mechanism. Around quality, again, there's a case study I can talk through the end if I have time, and also health, safety, and environment. There are use cases. So again, several use cases one could look at from an overall factory perspective. Supply chain specifically, the idea always is to enhance the transparency of the supply chain and enhance the ability of a company to track across the supply chain ecosystem what's happening on a real-time basis. And typically a control tower, one could put in a supply chain control tower to really feed in a lot of information across the supply chain elements and look at real-time data capture and decision making as well. So again, some of these things can actually also enable you to optimize your cost to serve as well, not just just look at putting some of these technologies in place, but also optimize cost and availability in the market, if your supply chain is well enabled. And as I mentioned, a smart and AI enabled control tower could really enhance that whole piece in terms of both collaboration, optimization, and decision making. So what does it really lead to, some of these things? And again, some of these numbers in terms of the benefits that you see on this slide are coming in from our experience of work and engagements that we've done for several clients across sectors. Besides making, an organization very paperless, more predictable, you have a lot of automation, you can create a digital twin. But specifically on OEE, which is operational efficiency, you could look at about 4 to 7%. Again, if the baseline of the organization is currently poor, it could even go much higher as well. But typically 4 to 7% for a reasonably mature operations. Quality improvement, about 10% PPM improvement. Again, we've generally seen, through visibility and real-time dashboards. 5 to 8% reduction in operations cost. 20% increase in my overall workforce reduction that could happen through automation. And of course, you could also look at automation of certain manual lines, packaging, etc. Similarly, maintenance operations cost reduction 10 to 15%, and supply chain visibility and control, as high as about 15 to 25%. So there are clear benefits, and I would definitely encourage all of you coming in from the industry to look at what part of the supply chain or what part of your overall operations you want to start with, and you could definitely look at very, very significant benefits in your overall operations. So if I have a few minutes, I'll just quickly touch upon 3 case studies. This is the first case example of a multi-plant, multi-application digital platform. Again, a client that we worked upon. Here, there were a number of challenges that you see on this slide, and I will possibly not read everything, which is on this slide. But definitely there was information, lack of information that was getting captured, which is again operational information, manual efforts, work allocation was not good, condition monitoring programs were not in place, etc. So we actually put in a solution which was kind of a holistic solution to connect a lot of machines in the plant for this company. And we also built in those features around check sheets, certain scheduling, systems, built around that, advanced analytics, because a lot of data would start coming in once you connect the machines. So, building a layer of advanced analytics as well, and overall plant level dashboards and even enterprise level dashboards. So there were 3 stages that we went through for this company. The first idea was to connect, which was really, as I spoke about, connecting the number of machines, looking at the legacy systems, what kind of data needs to come out, dashboarding, and the workflow, etc. Then the second part was more analytics, because there's a lot of information coming in. Now, how do you really use that information? Building that analytics layer, which is really focusing on what my management wants and what kind of decision making that needs to happen. And ultimately, once some of that happens, you could start focusing on optimization. So that's the third leg or the third level of such an initiative. And number of benefits. I mean, again, I've not quantified the benefits here on this slide, but again, number of benefits that we could see. The business case or the ROI was less than a year in this particular case, rather about 8-9 months alone. And we could actually enhance, reduce the losses, improve equipment condition, material flow, etc. This is the second one again, which again goes through a number of things, number of levels of, how this initiative worked for this client. Again, focusing on machine connectivity, cognitive inputs and masters, consulting, which is the bit that we did on KPIs and dashboards, data visualization, and ultimately alerts and notifications for management at different levels in the organization. The third one is on quality. Again, I'm putting a range of examples here so that we could possibly relate to some. This is around quality, again, tracking samples, documentation management, retrieval of test records, those limited visibility were some of the challenges. Again, we put in a barcode RFID based, tracking mechanism, an app that was also put in place, and a workflow was designed around that, around documentation management system and the overall workflow for inspection, etc. And ultimately, the data flows in real-time reports and dashboards, which could be used for decision making. This one is quickly on logistics. Again, the number of those, I've just kept a couple of simple ones here. This is on if you have a lot of fleet moving out on the roads. There are certain drivers who could be rash and who may be uncontrolled, and they may actually end up damaging the material in the truck itself. So how could you really profile the driver behavior using some real-time GPS data? And you can then therefore penalize bad drivers who drive badly versus good drivers who are always on time and they drive at in the right way and without damaging the product, etc. So some of these analytics would also be put in place. And this is really the last one on route analysis, where certain routes are not good. There could be bad terrain conditions, and incidents happened in the past. And accidents as well. How do you really identify those routes and therefore suggest routes which are good routes to the drivers on a real-time basis, and therefore avoids and have a better predictability of your products really reaching the destination. So that's where I really stop. I think I took more time than was allocated to me. So just to sum up, digital is not just about technologies. The idea here always is to solve business problems, creating unique experiences, and ultimately impacting the business performance in the right way. So thank you very much, for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Surab. We really appreciate it. So we're going to take some questions from the audience. I'm asking that you put the Q&A in the chat. Put your questions in the chat as opposed to the Q&A, although I do see there's one in the Q&A. So if you don't mind using the chat, it's just easier to manage one rather than two. So let me take the one that's in the Q&A for now, and then I'll switch back to the chat, which is, what type of companies handle this IoT tech process and people all together for an enterprise? Oh, okay. So I think she's looking for a company to help her implement some solutions around electrical mechanical engineers. I'm sorry, I'm not clear what the Carolina conception. Can you clarify what's the problem you want to solve? Is your problem the people or technology? Because you're asking for help for the engineers themselves. So if you could just let us know, what the problem that you're trying to solve is, maybe the speakers can get to it. But I think what she's looking for is who helps with IoT implementation. And I mean, I think both gentlemen will tell you that their companies help with IoT implementation.
Yeah, correct? I think of course, look, every company will say that they can help you in a lot of ways. And to be honest, very honest and very transparent, most companies can. And I think it's just important to pick the partner that suits what you're trying to do, very importantly. Obviously, if your focus is heavily into how do I organize my people around a technology, how do I implement a technology, or how do I implement something else that supports my business, it's just about choosing that partner correctly. I'm really sorry, I didn't understand the question myself either, but I guess that's just the chat thing doing its thing as usual.
Yeah. So just to say that the Digital Business Solutions and PwC do offer these services, and of course, if you reach out to the respective offices, and as they said, there are other companies that do it, and you define your problem, they'll try to work you through what they may be able to offer. What is a hardware solution? What's a software solution? What's a training solution, and then design your specific solution, which would also be the answer to Deborah Mahabir Yearwood's solution, which is that no, it's not a one size fits all. It needs to be customized? How easy is implementation? I'll let the speakers answer that question.
So that's actually a very good question. Sorry, Saurabh, if I jumped in for
No,
one
go ahead,
second
go
there. It's
No,
a very
please
good
go ahead.
question, because the first thing that pops into your head when you think IoT is we're going to have to change everything, or we're going to have to start drilling holes in walls, and we're going to have to start building servers. And that's not always the case. There are some very small, very efficient solutions that can be installed extremely quickly without doing any damage to your organization, that can give you the same results. So it's really just a sit-down consultation with your partner, whoever that is. If that's PwC, fine, no problem. If it's Digicel Business, that's great. And it's important to be able to do that, because sitting with your partner, explaining your problem, the technology partner will be able to look at the problem from a technology perspective, or from a process perspective, and say, okay, there's a couple of ways to do this, and depending on what way you want to do it. Just to give you a quick example, the illustration that I gave earlier of the food manufacturing company, the implementation time was 45 minutes to implement the solution. The time it took
That was putting in the,
that was actually physical installation
of the sensor.
Correct.
Yeah. And how long did it take you, or how long did it take the company to be able to use the data from the sensor to improve the uptime of the machines?
It was same day. Now, not every solution is going to be like that. Some solutions need time and data to show you trends over time. Other solutions will tell you immediately something's on or it's off, something's hot or it's cold, something's moved from this location to that location. And I think sort of really, really well, packaged that and showed us, all of these different types of solutions depending on the area of the business we want to address.
Saurabh, let me try and combine two questions and toss them to you that are related, right? So again, I think people are still afraid somewhat of the impact that integration of technology will have on the business in terms of disruption and disrupting processes that, okay, may not be resulting in that 47% return, but they're sure of the 10, 12, 15% return that they've become used to, right? At least if the economy is, or all other things being equal, right? So the question is, what is the effort required from staff in terms of timing, upload of data, training, and then what type of training, I'm combining two questions, should we consider for staff in trying to implement IoT or automation solutions, and in looking, if that's where you want to go when you're hiring new staff, how does that factor?
Sure, Nirad. It's again a good question, and as I mentioned, during my presentation, that typically, where do you start from in terms of digitization or any such initiative in the organization is a very, very important question to look at, because it's important that you start at the right pace and it gives you some early success, and that's what really builds a lot of confidence in the organization as to what are we trying to do, and is it really going to be accretive to the organization in terms of whether productivity, efficiency, cost, or any of those elements. So it's very important to really start right. And as I said, it could be part of, you could start in your manufacturing line setup. You could even start from a support function. So that's an important question to answer initially. The second part, possibly if I let me just go to the second part now. See, once you have implemented IoT or any such initiative which is enhancing, which is kind of a digital initiative in the organization, training of the team or even the mindset change of the team is a very important element of it. And a lot of times I've seen that people would feel scared of such an initiative because they feel that they may lose job at times. Second is if there are people in the organization they are doing their jobs in a certain way, you may typically take about a couple of months at times to really upskill them. And as I said, upskilling is not just about using a report or a button. Upskilling is also about a mindset change, and which is very, very important. So uploading of data, etc., can be very quick. It could be just a few hours activity, if not days. But I think ultimately making it as a way of working will take you a little time, maybe a month or two.
Okay. So again, I think we're still in the early stages of digital transformation of companies in Trinidad and Tobago, by and large, right? I mean, some companies are way ahead, and there's some factories, there's some companies that really have been set up as tech-enabled companies from the very get-go, or adopted that. But there are many who are still on that journey and in the early stages of that journey. And so there's a question around CapEx and the returns for CapEx. My perspective is that quite often the CapEx is lower than you think, unless you're a very large enterprise that needs system-wide upgrades. But would you guys care to weigh in on that, CapEx versus returns for digital transformation or IoT implementation, automation, etc.?
Okay, maybe let me go first and share here. See, again, it's a very broad question actually, Nirad, because when we talk about digitization, it could mean many things to many people in terms of what are we trying to do? Are we talking about putting a few sensors in the manufacturing line itself, or are we trying to really create a end-to-end digital landscape in ecosystem of the organization itself, and which could actually include my inbound operations, goods coming to the factory, my procurement function, my manufacturing, then the outbound, my downstream supply chain, my support function.
Yeah. Saurabh, let me just interject, right? I mean, but can't all that be phased? So when you have your consultation, and here, if you're talking about a factory and all of those things, you're talking about a fairly large business, right? At least from a revenue and production standpoint. So you can, when you have that consultation, you discuss with the business owner or the person who's running the business anyway, what the range of possibilities are and what the costs of that are, and you can say, you can test it by doing this first, meaning you can see what the value would be if you solve this problem first, and you can see how the employees react to that, or what the benefit to the customer is, and then you can decide how far along the journey you want to go, or whether you're okay with just improving, say, efficiency of electricity usage, or inventory management, or fleet management, or what have you. No,
Nirad, well said. And typically, as I mentioned earlier, see, most of the organizations look at digital transformation as a journey, and typically the first level of assessment, where we look to put together a digital strategy and a roadmap, takes about, let's say, a 6 to 8 weeks kind of an exercise. And within that, you also capture that if I have to do initiative number one, what is going to be the business case for it, the benefit, both the ROI and the the spend that I would need to do in terms of capex or any such thing. And that by the end of that 8-week kind of an exercise, that these are the 20 initiatives which are possible in my setup, and the prioritization of those in terms of both the ROI and the benefit it can deliver, etc. So you do that typically. At the same time, you could also go with a very point approach, saying that, okay, fine, in my organization, as I said, as you also said, you could focus on energy management, you can put in smart meters, or you could focus on maintenance to start with, just to really get a flavor of what digitization means. And these are low cost initiatives relatively. And once you see early success, then you can ramp up in terms of other areas.
Yeah. Brian, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, and I completely agree with both of your comments there. Most companies are able to quantify the number of man hours that they lose, or the amount of downtime that they have, or the challenges that they face from a particular thing. So they're able to quantify that in time or a dollar amount. And then you put that against a solution and how much that solution is going to cost you in terms of CapEx. And then you say, okay, well, we will get this back over the period of whatever it is, 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or whatever it is. So you can make that differentiation. But do remember, by implementing solutions like these, the optimizations are forever. This is not an optimization that's limited to a specific time. The optimization goes on for as long as you keep that in place, or as long as the organization still runs that way. So I hope that answers that piece of the question.
And I assume that companies like yours help do that business analysis as part of the implementation strategy, right?
Of course, outcomes are everything. You know, there's no point just, you know, showing somebody a solution and not telling them what it's going to do for them. You have to have a balance here and say, yes, it will cost this, but you will get back this over X amount of time. And again, a very simple example of that is if you install an electricity sensor in somebody's building and you say to them, by monitoring your electricity and being able to switch things off at nighttime, like we do at home, for example, will save you X amount on your bill. That is a real world impact of doing something with data.
Yeah. And of course, if Trinidad and Tobago were ever to get to a situation where electricity rates vary based on time, so at night the rates are lower than during the day, then all of those things you can look at as well.
Correct.
So there's a question around certification and training. I mean, it just literally says certification training question mark. I guess that means do you need high levels of certification and training within the organization, at least that's my interpretation, to be able to implement a process of automation or integration of the Internet of Things, data analytics into your operations?
Okay, I'll take the first shot at this one. So IoT is made up of 4 main categories, as in the device, the network, the software, and then you have the data analytics, the storage of all of that data. Individually, these can be things that can be sourced from multiple locations. You can go to anywhere you want and get your cloud service, and you can go to anywhere and get your devices.
But isn't there a 5th, which is people?
No, of course, yes. I'm leaving out the people and processes piece. I'm just talking about the actual technology piece, but good point. But when you go off and you source these things, you know, you can source them from 5 different companies. Trying to get people certified on implementing something like that would be extremely tiresome for any organization. So coming to an organization, again, like PwC or like Digicel Business, would enable us to be able to bring all of that together for you and then help you implement that for your people and for your processes, and then certify the teams on being able to operate that over time with the support of the businesses behind them.
Sure. Okay. So Saurabh, let me ask you this one, because I think it's indicative of a wider issue, which is what's the impact on people, right? So the question, and I'll read it as it's written. Most solutions look at operational efficiency in dollars and cents. What about better working environments for workers, say the factory? Would you say that IoT and data analytics have built-in positives in the short and long run? I guess from a worker perspective.
No, again, a wonderful question, I must say, because oftentimes we do forget the impact on people when we are looking at such initiatives, especially focused on automation and digitization, and a lot of it tends to revolve around money. So in my experience, again, where we have kind of implemented such solutions is that, yes, it does have a strong positive impact or benefit to the employees in the organization. Again, taking a case in point, if you talk about manufacturing itself, and if you are really doing a much better worker allocation to the lines, the way the lines are being set up and the way production is planned for a given day or production is scheduled for a given day, you could actually reduce overtime, or certain people who are spending more time than what they are supposed to spend in a given shift. Similarly, if you look at transactions, in a finance function, number of invoices being processed, or the number of payments being made, etc. Again, one could really track and monitor and optimize. So again, as I said earlier, as part of my overall structure, the whole health, safety, and environment can also be a big focus area within any such initiative. and it may go beyond just money at times, and definitely there can be a very, very strong positive impact on the workforce itself. Digital upskilling is a very, very important element as well, because this requires a bit of mindset shift, and therefore a bit of hand holding the employees through this journey of change that happens in an organization, so that they also accept it, and there's a good adoption of any such system that is implemented, because otherwise adoption suffers. You will also then suffer in terms of benefits and the outcomes of any such initiative.
So, but I would suggest that really that the answer to that question lies in the ethos of the company. So what does the company value, and therefore what would it spend time on? So you could spend time using technology to improve worker welfare as part of your larger corporate strategy. But if you are not focused on worker welfare with or without technology, you won't spend time and money on it.
Correct.
Okay, this is a nice one. What are some of the major barriers to adoption? I assume that means digital adoption that you've seen in T&T. Saurabh, I know you've been doing a lot of work in the Caribbean. I don't know how much in Trinidad and Tobago specifically, but feel free to draw on the Caribbean experience.
No, so the typical barrier to adoption is what's in it for me, and that's a question typically anyone would have the back of mind, saying that. And then I think this is a common human psyche, and I would not go by a country, whether it's Caribbean or T&T. Even in India, we see that where there is always a skepticism around any such initiative and what's in it for me, and people do worry that any such automation should not make a person redundant, and they feel that it could lead, and therefore if they have those kind of doubts in mind, they're not able to wholeheartedly participate and make the initiative very effective. So those are the kind of barriers which, as I said, it's a mindset shift. So a lot of these initiatives are successful if they are driven from the top. I've generally seen that there has to be a very, very strong sponsorship from the top. The walk the talk by leaders is very important. Proof of concept or a pilot which shows those real outcomes and benefits is important, and that is also, if you do that well, a proof of concept can really lay it out and build a lot of confidence amongst the overall management and the workforce. And lastly, the whole mindset play, which is what's in it for me. If you define that well, I'm sure you will overcome these kind of barriers.
So Brian, let me give you the easier part of the question and rephrase it a little bit, right? So Saurabh spoke about the perception that the move to adopt more technology is going to result in pretty much, there's a fair widespread job losses and people who can't participate in the labor market. How do you feel about that? I mean, when we mechanized agriculture, we just saw different jobs. When we had steam in factories and coal and so on, we found different jobs. Are we going to lose jobs, or are we going to create new jobs, or both, or none, neither?
Yeah, I think with the introduction of any new way of doing something, even leaving technology out of the equation for the moment, if you found a new way to harvest crops, easier, you're going to make a business decision here to save costs. So that's always a possibility. And of course, the introduction of technology into this obviously adds that aspect sometimes, but it also adds the aspect of reskilling people to manage and monitor these new systems that can do that. And I'm going to go with a very political answer here. I'm very new to Trinidad, of course. I am based in Trinidad, but I'm quite new here. But we as partners haven't always done a great job of simplifying it down and helping companies to understand that the optimizations are not just about introducing technology to remove the human element. It's about making the entire organization that little bit better and bringing the simplification into how they do that using the different means and methods.
Okay. Perfect. So not wanting to overstay our welcome, we've come to the end of this webinar. I think it was quite useful. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm sure Rayan is going to put the survey, the satisfaction survey. It's in the chat. We ask you to please fill out the survey so that we can improve or know what was useful to you or what wasn't, so that we can put on more things that would be of value over time. We, of course, thank our two speakers, Surab Jain and Brian Kane, for their time. And Brian, I think, you know, in as much as you indicated that you're new to Trinidad and Tobago, next round of drinks is on you. Of course, we thank all of our sponsors. We thank Republic Bank, PwC, and Digital Business, and of course, Trend Media, who helps us promote these things. We're very grateful for all of your support. This is part of the AMCHAM Digital Transformation Series, part of our Tech Hub Island Summit initiative, which we've embarked on for the last couple of years. We're happy to participate in this with the TTMA and the TTMA Digital 4.0 Committee, Productivity Committee. And you know, you see this private sector collaboration can only bring more benefits to us all and to the business environment. We encourage you to visit the booths at the TIC. I understand that they will continue a week after next week. So do check them out and stay check the TIC website and make sure that you know what's going on there. Also check out AmCham Trinidad and Tobago's website. We have our HSSE conference on demand for until next Friday, and as part of that, we had a very, very interesting session from PwC last Friday. It's of course on demand now, on the future of work, and we had PwC's, what I consider to be PwC's global guru on the future of work, as well as Zia Payton from the local office and the Chief Personnel Officer, talking about what the public sector here in Trinidad and Tobago is considering with regard to the future of work. It was a very interesting and engaging session. We had sessions on process safety. How can Formula One teach you about safety? We had sessions, of course, on root cause analysis, on human resource management and mental health, and so many more. So you could check all that out at amchamtt.com. And we have our exhibition still running, so you can get free access to the exhibition at amchamtt.com. So check that out as well. Thank you all for taking the time to log into this webinar. Thanks again to the presenters. Everything we do at AmCham Trinidad and Tobago really is for our members, and we're always grateful for your support and for that of the wider business community. So in these challenging times, as always, we remain firmly committed to our members. And as we say bye, we remind you to sanitize, social distance, wear your masks, let's stop the spread and try and get things back to normal, or as close to normal as we can, so we balance lives and livelihood as we move forward. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.